So, Brian, we're going to have a big discussion this week on the Russian war on Ukraine and how clean energy ties into that because the world is beholden to Russia for natural gas and regular oil, I guess, right?
Yeah, although it sounds like natural gas in Europe is one of the biggest things.
So there's been all kinds of pieces written about this in major newspapers. I found one in the Times. You found a couple in the Guardian. Yeah, so the headline in the LA Times is one way to combat Russia, move faster on clean energy. So, yeah, Germany is really dependent on natural gas, right? I mean, they're kind of, remember, we were just talking just last week about how they're shutting down their nuclear reactors out of, fear, I guess.
Yeah, although that could end up making them more dependent on natural gas that comes from Russia, which suddenly nobody wants for some reason.
Now, you might say maybe they should turn off the delay or delay the nuclear decommissioning, but apparently it's not easy. There'd be a lot of lawsuits involved and a lot of expense and a lot of questions about that. So it's not an easy given thing to do. And sounds like they're not going to do that.
Yeah, that's too bad. But yeah, I mean, just turning off a nuclear power plant. I mean, I assume you got to plan it like years in advance. They're so complicated and dangerous.
I just flicked a switch. Well, we're done with you.
Yeah. And you can't just, oh, wait, and turn the switch back on.
Yeah, that would be bad. Germany would like to import liquefied natural gas elsewhere, but a lack of a terminal in the country is causing problems. They won't be able to handle liquid natural gas or LNG imports. LNG supplies would be able to fully replace Russian gas. It's also an expensive alternative, as you can imagine, shipping the gas in instead of pipelining it from your neighboring country. So gas already comes in from Norway, but those supplies cannot be increased. It is already producing at its capacity. A reminder that liquid natural gas is super chilled gas. So what they do is they condense it by cooling it into a liquid form, then throw it on these big vats on a ship, and they regasify it at, it sounds like something have to be in taco time of the weekend, at specialist terminals. They regasify the gas. And Russia exports between 150 billion and 190 billion cubic meters of gas to Europe each year, typically fulfilling 30 to 40% of the demand across the continent. The whole continent is that much dependent on Russian natural gas. They didn't learn anything when they went into Crimea. That's kind of a pisser, I'm mad about that. A lot of people didn't learn anything. I'm sorry. Here we go. The son of a bitch poisons his opposition leader, walks into Crimea, takes in territories, and we don't do anything about it. And guess what happens? You don't do anything, then, he's emboldened. If there's one guy living in a bunker, and by the way, he is a cowardly little man, talk about your social distancing. They've had to build him bigger tables so he can distance himself away from the next person. It's like a city block away for the next guy at the table.
Yeah, well, I have
cowardly little man, Putin,
too, so I can stay away from my family.
Well, you need a big space. So, Putin, if you're listening, I'm going to kill you.
What?
I'm going to come after you in your sleep, and I'm going to kill you.
I think you're going to get us in trouble with the podcast police.
Oh no! It's Putin.
Oh, so it's okay?
Yeah, it's okay if you kill Putin. There's laws everywhere, written and unwritten, that you can kill despots. So screw him. Yeah, Putin's an idiot. He's a cowardly little man. And so the U.S., Qatar, and Australia are the biggest exporters of natural gas, and Qatar is willing to increase its LNG supplies to Europe, which is fine, but it's also Qatar. On paper, Europe has a capacity to import an extra 147 billion cubic meters of LNG a year, according to analysts at Wood Mackenzie. And that's enough to replace the Russian pipeline stuff in its entirety. I don't know what's going to happen. Do you think they're going to shut down the pipeline once things get ugly? And they're getting ugly.
It's hard to imagine. And of course, we're obviously big proponents of clean energy on this show. And obviously the solution is to switch to clean energy. And then really every country on Earth can have energy independence and not have to worry about these kinds of issues. But sadly, we all still need to heat our homes. And
it shouldn't be 40% dependent on Russia for gas.
It is
not when there's
surprising,
alternatives. Yes. That's stupid. It's your own fault, Europe. Especially after what happened in Crimea in 2014 and everything else that's happened since. Come on. You're taking the easy way out. You deserve this. Is karma. That's what this is. So we have to do better. Europe is going to go to green energy. They're going to go to heat pumps for hot water and home heating. They're going to have to increase insulation. Do it now. Do it right freaking now, like the world depends on it, because it does. And people in the States have called on Biden to sort of have a big sweeping legislation for American manufacturers to start doing that. If they did, that would bring down the price for when America makes its transition. The technology in volume would be improving the technology and lowering the cost of it. So, yeah, the German Minister of Finance is called Renewables Freedom Energy. And I, Brian Stockton, think he's right. And that was in his latest parliamentary address not long ago. So the switch could take at least a decade in practice, not least due to the fact of the onward infrastructure, not in the right place. Germany, Europe's biggest gas market, has no LNG import terminals, as I said, so they have to build that. You can't build that quickly. Ports are not an easy thing. So,
yeah, well, energy independence is obviously super important, but it kind of relates to all the trouble we've been having in Canada lately, too, because Canadians also feel like energy independence is super important. And of course, we produce a lot of our own oil and gas, but it's for whatever reason, in many quarters of the earth, energy independence and being self-reliant is associated almost solely with fossil fuels. So a lot of the rhetoric around Canadian freedom and being energy independent is really tied to the fossil fuel industry. But, we need to obviously switch that. Everybody can be energy independent using clean energy. And it's not just the places lucky enough to have oil on their property.
I want to say a couple of things here. I want to say that the governments in the oil provinces in Canada and the conservative side of things are saying we need to release as much Canadian gas and oil as we can right now to combat this. So they're not getting it. They're not helpful. That's bullshit.
Yes, although isn't there going to be a short-term need for that?
Is there going to be a short-term need for it? Not in a way to build a pipeline to across the entire country, which they want to do.
Okay. Let's not do that.
That doesn't make any sense, and they know that. So it's bogus. There's plenty of gas in the States already. We don't have to. It's just still have to ship it there, right? You still have to ship it there, and they're just saying, well, maybe they should buy our gas. Well, fine, but it's a temporary thing. It's within this decade at the most, if they get their act together. The second thing is, sorry, I'm going to have to place a marker here and make an edit. The second thing is, there's been a lot of talk about long distance transmission of clean electricity, like Australia is getting some and sending some to another far, like Singapore, right?
Yeah, through the ocean.
So those are just like pipelines.
Yeah.
They're more instantaneous. And I've heard people advocate for making a bunch of solar in Arizona and piping it to Canada for the winter and having a big DC transmission line at, huge expense and even environmental costs because you have to go through land and disrupt things. But what happens if something happens politically in the States compared to Canada or vice versa? I mean, you kind of want to keep these things local, although it's very convenient not to. But there's still that issue with clean energy, remarkably.
Yeah, although, whatever tools you have. And yeah, it's probably better if the North American grid is all connected and we do share our energy back and forth across borders. It is probably in every country's interest to be fully independent. So you don't have to take the chance of somebody crazy getting in power.
So Leonard Burnham, the CEO of Germany's biggest gas and electricity provider, E.ON, said that while electricity supplies for this winter were secure, next year could be more of a challenge. If Russian gas imports were to break down completely, the immediate effect wouldn't be so dramatic, as we're almost at the end of the heating season. But next winter, it could be the case of something different. It'd be hard to meet the demands of the industrial customers, and some of them may even have to turn off their power from time to time. So it is utopian to believe that Russian gas can be completely replaced one day to the next by other sources, said D. He told Die Zeit, which is the Times, I believe. So I don't know. They can't temporarily restart the nuclear reactors. And like I said, they're saying that it was politically suicidal in Berlin. I don't understand Berlin. Like, I'm not really pro-nuclear. I don't think you are. But they're really against it. Like, there's something about in the culture that sort of got seeded in the 70s during the 3 Mile Island.
Yeah,
was the name of the reactor in the States. Yeah, after that, things changed in Germany, and then Fukushima happened, and it was no, let's get out as fast as possible.
No, and we were talking about France a couple of weeks ago, and France is way more pro-nuclear for whatever reason. They've had a lot of it, and they haven't had any disasters, I guess. So there's a lot of French pride around their safe nuclear power. Safe.
Yeah, and they're right next door.
Yeah.
So what's up with that?
It's like they speak a whole different language.
But still, I think France is 70% nuclear, so they still need gas, they still need stuff. There's no evidence of ordinary Germans panicking, says the article. Though heating installation companies say there has been a considerable increase in inquiries about heat pumps from people keen to find the alternative to natural gas. That should be a priority. I don't care what happens in Ukraine from now on, from this moment forward. Heat pump, everywhere. Here, there, United States. Let's get going on heat pumps, because why wait? They do exist. Is there any reason not to, Brian?
No, there's not. And, we've been doing this podcast for 2 years now, and I feel like heat pumps barely came up in conversation even just 2 years ago. And now things have changed so quickly. It's becoming very clear, very apparent that electric heat pumps, air source, ground source heat pumps are going to be vital to the future. Bill McKibben, the noted environmentalist who we've mentioned on the show before, he has a blog on Substack. And he's suggesting that the U.S. should use the Defense Production Act to start making heat pumps for Eastern Europe. Like, this is, instead of making bombs, basically, instead of fighting Putin with bombs, let's fight him with heat pumps. So the Defense Production Act has been actually used a couple of times recently to make both ventilators for the COVID crisis, and I believe also to make masks. This is a way that the U.S. government can essentially force industry to do its bidding and make it, not for free. They're sort of awarded a government contract, but it's a great out of the box kind of idea that if the U.S. suddenly started building heat pumps by the millions and shipping them to Eastern Europe and helping this transition, it absolutely reduces Putin's power.
But your average American voter won't understand any of this unless they listen to the show, and there's a few that do.
Yeah, so the couple of dozen people that listen to our show are going to be real excited about this.
Yeah, it's got to happen. It's got to happen now, and they're not giving away the heat pumps. So you're not giving away. You're just incentivizing a company to make them.
Yeah,
and helping with the logistics and all that. But there'll be profit for everybody.
Yeah, and you could never switch all of them overnight anyway, so it's going to be a process of generally replacing the oldest furnaces and boilers first. It's going to be a long, slow process no matter what you do.
For people who are new to this, and there are some people who listen to our show who are just dipping their feet in the waters of clean energy, a heat pump is a reverse air conditioner that is much, much more efficient than any other electrical heating, which is why we don't use electrical heating. If possible, use natural gas whenever possible, because it's cheaper and a lot more energy produced by that.
Yeah, but if you switch your electric heating to a heat pump electric heater, then suddenly it gets way more efficient. And, this is the thing that really the entire world is basically going to be switching to eventually as we get off fossil fuels.
Now, it can be a bit problematic in a place where we live, where we still have about 45% coal. That's the problem. The idea, though, is everywhere, including here, is going green. They're going to clean energy, and 100% at some point. So the grid gets cleaner continually, no matter where you live.
Yeah.
No matter where you live.
No, there's always an argument of, I drive an electric car, but of course our electricity is generated by coal, which is not ideal. But the alternative is to do nothing, and that's not an alternative. So we got to start switching all this stuff, and the grid gets cleaner every year, even around here.
So the idea is that by 2040, 2050, everybody's got fuel-efficient houses, well-insulated, and heat pumps, heating the water, heating the house, and it's coming from a very 100%, 99% clean grid of wind turbines, batteries, and solar panels, and a little mix of everything else, some hydro and all that. So the Nordstream 2 pipeline has been canceled. That was a 1,230-kilometer long natural gas pipeline under the Baltic Sea running from Russia to Germany's Baltic coast, and it runs parallel to an earlier Nord Stream pipeline, which is why it's called number 2, and it would double the capacity to 100 billion cubic meters of gas a year. And European nations were making plans to cut their reliance on energy exports from Russia. The country supplies more than a quarter of Europe's oil and nearly 40% of its natural gas, so we've said. So the Russian aggression has sped up the EU's plans. I hope, Brian, that it has, and officials are expected to release a strategy next week for reducing the continent's use of fossil fuels by 40% over 8 years and ramping up non-polluting energy sources. We will be covering that and looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, maybe it's helpful to have, to put a face to this. Of course, it's been difficult to convince all the governments of the world and all the people of the world that climate change is a real thing and we have to get on this. But I don't know, maybe it's, I think Putin probably made an error in judgment that, this is going to just accelerate the transition to clean energy, and he's not going to have the power.
He's made an error in so many ways, He's united the world. Ukraine is going to join the EU the second it can, and Finland is going to join NATO, and it's just the opposite of everything he wanted. Is happening.
Then why did he do it?
Because he's a Hitler and a bunker. He's gone. I think COVID isolated him. It's made us all a little crazy. If you started as a dictator to begin with, you go maybe a little more crazy. You know what I'm saying? It's a theory.
Yeah, he should just, step down and start a podcast.
About what? The people he's killed? Screw you, Putin. I know you're listening. Screw you. May your bunker be filled with farts from Ukraine. So there's a UC Berkeley energy professor, Daniel Kamen. He's lamented in this article that Europe has clearly needed higher motivations in climate change to cut the gas knot with Russia. So, yeah, what he's saying is, wasn't the climate crisis enough to do that?
No,
apparently
it was not.
No, that's frustrating. Come on, people. And Europe's way more progressive than us at dealing with climate and having it at the forefront. So for all we talk about how inexpensive renewables are and how quickly energy storage is coming down in price, it hasn't been enough when it appears that just the climate is at stake. And now European sovereignty is at stake and everybody wants to act. So European investments to scale up early stage technologies like green hydrogen are getting underway and long-term battery storage, and that might help drive down the costs for everyone else in the world. Russia is the leading producer of metals, including copper and nickel, and that's apparently going to hurt the electric car market a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's negatives everywhere.
That's the other part of this, is that there's already supply chain issues, and this may create more.
Let's see here. Sarah Lindish-Law, managing director of the climate think tank RMI, thinks a prolonged conflict between Russia and Ukraine is more likely to accelerate the transition. And oil staying above or near $100 a barrel for a protracted period of time makes a renewable investment look better, she said. If the price environment and the strategic conflict last just a bit longer, I think it drives people to find alternatives. And that's hilarious because we live in two oil
The Clean
provinces
Energy
here,
Show with
up in
Brian
Canada,
Stockton and
who
James
are basically
Whittingham.
Putins when it comes to their petrol. They'll do anything to make money off their petrol, and they take money from the petrol companies, the oil companies, for their bank accounts to fund their campaigns. Yeah, it's hilarious. They're so happy. Oil's back, and it's like going to stay here forever, and we're going to thrive, and the streets are going to be paved in gold. And no, everyone's going to buy an EV.
No, and
I included.
Ironic too that there's a large Ukrainian population here where we live, and they're not too happy about this. But hey, the price of oil's up.
Yay! And that's why they were also advocating these local politicians to cut off purchases of gas from Russia. And it wasn't, to punish them. They didn't care about punishing them. What do they care? What are they getting specific about foreign policy? No, they want the price of gas to go up for their buddies who are phoning them every day, asking them to do this. So, so no gas. This is something I thought about, Brian, because if you watch the news, they're out of gas in Kiev. Something I've learned is that Russians call it Kiev. So Ukrainians more often call it Kyiv.
Oh, okay.
So we don't want to call it Kiev, maybe a little bit of Kyiv.
And I will add, too, I'm still taking a mental health break from the news.
I know. I thought this whole thing might be a shock to you once I revealed it to you. It's like
some of this is new information, but when something this large is happening, it's impossible to block it all out. So I have a vague sense of what's going on in Ukraine.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry about that. They're out of gas in the Ukraine. So I wondered, of course, how many EVs are there? And could somebody because the electrical system, as of publication of our podcast, was still working.
Yeah.
And of course, if you had to place the solar panels, you could charge up and do things like that. But the answer is there's actually 30,000 electric vehicles, which is not many. It's only about 1%. But most of them, basically 6 out of 7 are imported used vehicles. There's a lot of Nissan Leafs, for example, so the range isn't going to be great. And I noticed there's a lot of Teslas, but no Tesla, infiltration into the Ukrainian market, no superchargers, no store, no official Tesla. And they've been getting lobbied by all the Tesla owners there. They made this really slick video. I'm not going to play a clip of it because it's all music, but it's very slick. And it seems like there's hundreds of them. They just parade down the highway, and there's, it's like a Russian convoy. It's Tesla after Tesla after Tesla. And they're all made it for Elon Musk to see and start. And I guess they were thinking about it. But at least he sent some Starlink stuff there because, the average Ukrainian makes less than $600 per month. And that's why EVs aren't a lot of things there. Newspapers that reported on this locally said that charging cable theft was a problem. And I noticed that it's 377 kilometers from Kyiv to the Romanian border where a lot of people are evacuating. But if you got no gas, it's interesting how maybe somebody might be using an EV in Ukraine right now. And by the way, they even had incentives. They had incentives coming, including a reduction in tariffs to import them and support of charging infrastructure, which is more than we have here, where you and I live. Poor Ukraine, where the average income was that, and they were able to do that and think that far ahead. So Tesla, as you know, has been offering free supercharging outside Ukraine.
Yeah, so there's no superchargers directly in Ukraine, apparently, but the surrounding countries, they have offered not only free supercharging to help people get around if they're trying to escape conflict, but they've been able to open it up to non-Tesla vehicles. So they've started doing this as pilot projects in the Netherlands and in Norway. The Tesla superchargers have traditionally just been for Tesla cars, but now they have software that opens it up. So yeah, not only is the charging free, but they've opened it up to any and all makes of cars. You just need probably the app and then the right connector to make sure it'll connect to your car.
So in Europe, they use the CCS connector on Teslas. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. So it should be, everybody should basically have the CCS connector, and that's probably what those Tesla stations have.
All right, Brian, I'm going to segue into something that is kind of related to this. The U.S. Army is reducing its carbon output by planning on electrification of many of its vehicles. And I had some interesting data here that I wanted to share with you. Thinking about, because the Russian tanks are running out of gas.
Oh, yeah.
They're also falling off bridges in large numbers. I saw a thread of all the tanks and armored vehicles that fell off bridges, because I guess a lot of these conscripts were not very well trained, and that's sad. They're as old as my kid, and they're sent on. They weren't even told they were going to war, and then when they were, they told that they were going to be welcomed with open arms.
Well, I guess you could tell me anything, and I would have to believe you, since I'm not looking.
Yeah, because you're not really part of the outside world.
I'm just here in my bomb shelter.
I've been elected King of Sweden.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.